Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. And, you know, when I go home to Texas, I'm a car dealer, okay? I'm a car dealer in Texas. I employ hundreds of people for 52 years. And so when I'm talking to business owners back in my district, I know what they're going to say. And what they say are they're concerned about the SEC's push to implement costly environmental, social, and political regulatory requirements, which will require them to disclose, and us, climate-related information that is not relevant or material for their companies. Now, businesses are already struggling to operate within tight margins, high interest rates. Their profits are seeing their profits erode, and an increase in compliance costs could be even more of a tipping point to their future. The SEC's proposed climate requirements will cost companies millions for them to ensure they comply, and I'm worried about this proposal will discourage companies from even getting into business or entering or staying in the public market, which will hinder competition, stifle economic growth, and go back to jobs. The biggest issue is that the SEC does not even have the legal authority, and we've talked about that today, to enforce climate-focused regulations. And this proposal exceeds the SEC's intended mission and their statutory authority, and it's the job of Congress to set an environmental policy, not unelected bureaucrats. So the fact is the Biden administration, here we go again, Bidenomics, does not have the votes to pass a climate agenda through Congress. So they're trying to push climate-related policy through financial regulators, and this committee is tasked with overseeing the SEC, and we must rein in the abuse of the rulemaking process before they cause any further damage to Main Street America. So, Mr. Copeland, if the SEC continues to operate outside of their statutory purview, how will their proposed climate disclosure rules negatively impact financial institutions and small businesses, and what will the implications be on the U.S. public market?
Well, assuming that they get a rule enacted and it's not overturned in court, and I predict it probably would be, but assuming they have an operative rule that does what they're calling for initially, things like Scope 3 emissions, you know, the financial institutions are going to have general counsels, right? And the financial institution general counsels are going to say, how are we going to comply with this rule? And when you start figuring out how we're going to comply with this rule, well, okay, we're going to ask the car dealer, or we're going to ask the family farmer that Representative Scott was talking about, and we're going to say, you've got to tell us all your climate impacts. And you don't have teams of economists, you don't have teams of analysts to do this. So you're gonna lose access to credit, you're gonna lose access to business, and so it's gonna be devastating potentially on a lot of small businesses and family farmers if this were to be enacted and actually enforced.
Yeah, these people can't afford lawyers, they can't afford these folks, so it is devastating. So secondly, shareholder engagement is one of the most important parts of corporate governance. Now, however, shareholder proposals have begun to try and hijack boardrooms, and we talked about it this morning, and turn them into platforms for political agendas. Now, it comes at no surprise that the SEC governs this process and has been instigating these groups to submit proposals and do not align with a company's interests or core duties. So it's the duty of an institution to protect the financial interests of all investors, not just a particular group that is trying to be the loudest in the room. And this process must be revised to ensure companies can protect the interests of real shareholders. Mr. Copeland, could you elaborate on the effects that partisan and political shareholder proposals have on institutions' ability to create value for all shareholders, not just one select group that is trying to advance a radical agenda?
I mean, the reality is, why do we even have dispersed stock ownership in corporations? What economists will call agency costs are actually higher for this type of equity ownership in many regards. But what they do is align around shareholder primacy. People brought up Milton Friedman, align interests around a single variable, share value, and it makes it easier to do business. When you start making each boardroom a political football field, then it becomes hard to be an efficient business and do your job. The folks in this body know that this body isn't known for its efficiency, and so making a political football field out of every business is not a good way to run all our businesses.
So I've got limited time, and I'll shorten my question. Mr. Cunningham, could you expand on the effects of financial regulators forcing ESG policies on the private sector, what it will have on retail investors and their ability to grow their own wealth?
Yeah, I mean, the genius of corporate law is that shareholders get to buy stock and then they have no duties. They don't have a fiduciary obligation, they don't have to vote, they don't have to do anything. But elect a board of directors, which is the fiduciary body and the overseers of the corporation, and that's the body that should make these decisions. And the shareholders should not be telling the managers what to do or telling the board what to do. When a small subset of shareholders do that, they will hurt the other shareholders.
Everybody's an expert. My time is up. I yield back.